Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Isabella Leite, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us today in this exciting event on Amazonian resilience, addressing drought and water connectivity. As you know, the Amazon basin is a critical component for hydrological cycling, being responsible for rainfall not only in the region, but outside of it, in many areas of South America. It also has the largest river discharge on Earth and holds a remarkable biodiversity. However, this system is increasingly threatened by mining and its residues, dams, deforestation, climate change, just to name a few. And strong droughts have been increasing in intensity and frequency over the past years. And as you probably remember, we had a terrible example of a drought last year in the Amazon. This, of course, has terrible consequences for Amazonian populations and biodiversity. So today, we are thrilled to launch 2 policy briefs of the Science Panel for the Amazon, the SPA. The SPA is formed by a group of over 280 scientists, most of them from Amazonian countries, who have come together to synthesize the most up-to-date knowledge about the Amazon. And the SPA produced the 2021 Amazon Assessment Report, which was launched at COP26. And this report became known as an encyclopedia for the Amazon. And after this, the panel produced many policy briefs that address not only the current state of the Amazon, but also provided some policy recommendations. So today, the first policy brief to be launched is Droughts in Amazonia, that will be presented by 2 lead authors, Dr. Flavia Costa and Dr. José Marengo. Flavia Costa is an SPA author and scientist at the Instituto Nacional de Pesquisas da Amazônia. And José Marengo is also a SPA author and a senior member of the Scientific Committee of the Brazilian Panel on Climate Change and of the IPCC. The second policy brief, Conserving the Amazon's Freshwater Ecosystem's Health and Connectivity, will be presented by one of its lead authors, Dr. Andrea Encalada. Andrea is the former co-chair of the Science Panel for the Amazon and member of its Science Steering Committee. She is also a Vice Chancellor at the Universidad San Francisco de Quito. We'll also have the honor of hearing from Ms. Beka Munduruku, a 22-year-old indigenous leader of the Munduruku people and member of the SPA Strategic Committee, on the implications of the policy brief's findings for indigenous peoples and local communities. Following Beka, we'll hear from Erwin, practice manager of the World Bank's Climate Change Fund Management Unit, which mobilizes climate finance through trust funds that deliver innovative, scalable climate and environmental action. After the presentations, we'll have a question. After the presentation, we'll have a questions and answer session. I would also like to let you know that we have simultaneous interpretation to Portuguese. One of our speakers will be speaking Portuguese, so you can get your headset right over there in that table. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Flavia Costa, Dr. José Marengo, and Dr. Andrea Encalada to the floor. Thank you.
Oh, okay, good, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is José Marengo, I'm a climatologist. I will speak on some of the aspects of the drought in the Amazon, then follow my colleague Flavia Costa. Well, we have this figure that sort of summarizes the different aspects of drought. In this case, for instance, we have the climatic components of the drought, which could be natural climate variability, El Niño, tropical Atlantic, and also the component of climate change. Then we have the possible consequences of drought in the Amazon that has to do with biodiversity and losses and processes like deforestation, the consequences of fires, and then other of the consequences on the population, either the local population or the remote population in terms of socioeconomical consequences, water, transportation, and all the problems that we usually notice in situations like this. Okay, well, to give you some of the key messages, then my colleague Flavia will speak on some different other aspects. What we have in there is a drought map. When you see is an integrated drought index. When you see the darkest colors are the regions where actually drought is very severe. And you have in different parts of the Amazon, in southern Amazon, and also in the western part of the Amazon. This was for 2023. And currently now, we are in a situation where the drought is still there. Okay, so there are major concerns what could happen next year. So in this case, the frequency of droughts has been increasing since the last 24 years, since the beginning of the century. We have major droughts in there, like 2005, 2010, 2015, and 16, and all of them, they have consequences in terms of fires, forest degradation, hydrological consequences, like you see, for instance, the levels of the Rio Negro in Manaus. The blue is the maximum levels, and the red is the minimum levels. And you see the lowest value on all of this was in October 23. Since the beginning of the observations in September 902, it reached 12.7 meters, when normally it's supposed to be 5 meters above. That has been the lowest level in history in there. And interestingly, we have that the impacts together, because together with the drought, we have heat waves. And that's the worst combination, what are called the compound events. Those are the ones that actually produce the most damage, particularly fires in the Amazon or low river levels, which affect transportation. And in the Amazon, we don't have highways, we have river waves. Basically, people use them as a highway. In the last 20 years, 18 severe floods and 12 extreme droughts have happened. 6 of them have occurred in between 1995 and 23, and 7 have occurred between 1903 to 1994. So it's meaning basically that the streams in the Amazon are becoming extreme. In 2005, we have what people call, at the time, the drought of the century. 5 years later, there was another drought of the century. So we have many droughts of the century in less than 20 years. So these nominations, like droughts of the century, they no longer have any meaning in there. And the scenario has been changing since the drought in 23, 24. The current situation, the natural causes of drought in there have been related with anomalies in circulation, like El Niño phenomenon, for instance. But also there have been recent studies that they show droughts related to climate change, which meaning the anthropical influences. Other of the players in the Amazon is the North Atlantic. So at this time, as in 2023, the North Atlantic is extremely warm. That's the reason why we have at the beginning of the hurricane season, we have a Beryl, which actually was Category 5 hurricane in there. And whenever we have a combination of El Niño and or tropical Atlantic, warmer than normal, we have a drought situation coming. During La Niña, according to several studies, we have rainy seasons in the Amazon. But at these times, we are at the beginning of La Niña, but it seems like the tropical Atlantic is dominating La Niña. Why I say that? Because this is the current situation we have in the Amazon. Here. Severe drought in some parts, including in the state of São Paulo. In the Amazon, we have severe drought and moderate drought in the states of Amazonas, Roraima, and Pará. And these are the forecasts, the seasonal forecasts for the next season, July, August, September. That's the climate forecast. And September is the beginning of the rainy season. These are from the European models, from second one from the American models, and the last one is a combination, an ensemble from the World Meteorological Organization. If you notice in here, September is the beginning of the rainy season in the Amazon. What we have in there is the brown color. Brown color and yellow colors mean less rainfall than normal. So all of the models, they show that the situation currently starting as a drought, it may continue until September. Of course, it's a bit early to say if the rainy season will start or if the drought will extend in 2005. But there is a high possibility that the drought will extend in 2005. So the impacts we have this year, 2023, in the Amazon, we may be seen there again. And it's not only in the Amazon, we are talking about other regions because the neighboring regions like the La Plata Basin in southeastern Brazil and Argentina also depend on moisture coming from the Amazon. And if we have a major drought of the Amazon, we have less moisture coming to other regions outside and maybe like a chain reaction having droughts in other places outside the Amazon. Okay, so this is what is coming. Of course, that may change in the next month, so we have to be ready looking at the seasonal forecast from different centers around the world, but that's the current situation we have. Okay, so I pass it now to Flavia.
Okay, Marengo told you already, but I will restart by saying that droughts have many ecological, social, and economic consequences. And one of the most dangerous consequences of droughts is the increasing in tree mortality. And this is because tree mortality implies in a loss of tons of carbon to the atmosphere, which feed back to global warming. And we are seeing this increase in the loss of carbon to the atmosphere since the last 3 decades. Now it's almost 4 decades. In this graph, we can see biomass change, which means carbon change. The positive values mean the forest's uptaking carbon, negative values, it's losing carbon. And we see that although it's positive yet, it's approaching 0. And this study was conducted up to 2010. There is evidence that we may be now very close to 0, which means the forest is losing the capacity to function as a sink of carbon. And our research is also showing which regions are more vulnerable to drought. We see here, let's see if this works. No, it doesn't work there. So in the yellow colors, we see the regions that are most vulnerable in terms of climate. So trees are more vulnerable to drought where they already are in climates that are drier. And trees are more vulnerable to drought in regions where they have intrinsic characteristics that make them more vulnerable, hydraulic traits, for instance. And combining this information, we see in the last graph that with many colors, that the warmer colors in the south and the east show the regions that are more vulnerable to droughts. And these regions are already impacted not only by droughts, but deforestation and forest degradation. So these are areas of serious concern in the Amazon. Oops, not working. Oh, too much. Oops. It's kind of delayed. Oh, sorry. Okay, the other strong concern we have with droughts is animal mortality. So droughts have been increasingly intense to the point of killing thousands of animals. This is from last year's drought. We have seen these thousands to millions dead fish across the river in many regions as the waters became as hot as 40 degrees Celsius. This means the fish are being cooked, they don't have enough oxygen to breathe. And this affects local population that depend on this fish for food. And it was not only fish. Maybe you have seen in the news the many river dolphins that were killed. This was in the hundreds. And in some places, we also have seen dead animals in the land dying from the drought because mostly of the heat. So we saw this dead animal hanging on a tree dead. This was very sad. And losing animals, it's not bad because we lose biodiversity. These animals are resources for local population. And as Marengo also said, droughts increase fire, and this is in the order of 2 to 4 times more than in normal years. And because of that, lots of carbon are going to the atmosphere. And as droughts are becoming more widespread and more intense, as you can see in these panels, the 2005, 10, and 15 droughts increasingly spanning across the Amazon, so does fire. And in the last years, so 2015 and the last year, droughts have been hitting the center of the Amazon, which is a region where fire never happened like that. And this has serious concerns, not only because, well, we are increasing carbon in the atmosphere, increasing global warming, but also those fires mean all the places around are being covered by dense smoke. This is Manaus in the heat of last year's drought. And this means a tremendous health crisis. Hospitals are not prepared to deal with the many people that were there because of smoke. This was for weeks. I live in Manaus, I can tell you, was terrible. And not only that, droughts also transform what is the Amazon wetlands. Imagine, this is a wetland, into these dry lands where people are struggling to find water to drink, to cook, to bathe. And the little water they can find is too hot, it's full of sediments, and it's polluted. So this also feeds the health crisis with many diseases borne by polluted water. And also droughts destroy many crops. Small farmers, large farmers, monocultures, all the food was being lost in these strong droughts. And also because the fish are being killed, this means an immense food crisis throughout many localities in the Amazon, which is also compounded by the low waters in the rivers, because as Marengo also said, the rivers are the routes of transportation. So low waters means almost no transportation, many isolated communities, and the impossibility of also some economic traffic, because rivers are also the transportation route for that. And also problems of energy production, because several places in the Amazon depend on hydropower. So it's a strong crisis linked to all of those. And so, what do we need to change that? Well, there's many aspects that need to change, but I will summarize some of them. So in terms of prevention and mitigation, first of all, we need to recognize that the Amazon needs to stand alive and healthy to provide the resources for local populations and for the globe in terms of ecosystem services. And this requires the immediate reduction of greenhouse gas emissions towards the Paris Agreement. And this means redirecting investments from carbon-intensive to carbon-free economies. Specifically in the Amazon, this means stop making deforestation for new monocultures and put investments in agroforestry and other agroecological types of food production, which benefit local people aside of being more carbon, less carbon. And to conserve the forest, we need strong actions to increase the area that is conserved, especially in regions that have the higher chance to remain as forest as climate changes. This requires new research to define where these areas are. And we need restoration in the south and the eastern Amazon that have been so damaged. We also need reinforcement of protection of the areas that are already protected but facing a lot of danger in terms of illegal mining, illegal logging, and several other threats. And there's still need to continue research. We need to better understand and monitor droughts to deliver better policies. In terms of adaptation, there's urgent need to implement laws and damage and adaptation funds. And the governments that, of the Amazon countries need to implement programs on fire control, water storage and treatment, food security, and control and monitoring of the diseases that are borne by droughts. And these programs need to be made in co-production with the local population, need to include capacity building, so they become capable of managing the drought disasters. And that's it. Thank you so much for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is André Encalada, and I'm very happy to present the policy brief that we prepared on conserving the Amazon freshwater ecosystem's health and connectivity. I want to thank the other author, Adalberto Val, the many co-authors, and also the reviewers and the secretariat for all the help that we have had. Carlos, Marielos, and Emma as well. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit of why this network of rivers, wetlands, and water in general in the Amazon River Basin is so important, and the main functions that this system has, the dimensions of connectivity that we have in this whole watershed, and what are the main drivers of change, and also some recommendations for actions. The complete thing is in the policy brief, so please read it. This is just a brief summary. So, I don't know where I should point out. See? Okay, so as Marengo and Flavia already said, the Amazon River Basin is the largest watershed in the world. So why? Because it's draining all this huge area that belongs to 8 different countries and 1 territory, and is responsible for approximately 20% of the global flow of fresh water that goes from rivers to the oceans. So it hosts an amazing biodiversity, and there's more than 48 million people living there, and from which 2.2 million are indigenous people. And there are many functions, critical functions that the Amazon waters are doing. So all these properties that I just mentioned are part explained by the amazing geology and biological history that we have in the Amazon. The Amazon as we know it, the flow of the Amazon, started just 10 million years ago. Before that, there was life here. However, the Amazon was not flowing in that direction. So what was the big change? The big change was the Andean Cordillera. So with the rise of the Andean Cordillera, the Amazon started to flow. And of course, many species disappear, and got extinct, but some stay there, and many others started to evolve, and there was a very rapid speciation because mountains and gradients promote rapid speciation. So what we really have here is a natural connectivity from the Andes to the Amazon to the Atlantic. So, but it's not just water that connects. There are many things that are connecting with this water. So this connection is the connection that many watersheds have. So the longitudinal, the lateral, the vertical, and the temporal connections, many watersheds have. What is important about this Amazon basin is where it's situated is in the tropics, in the latitude of the tropics, right on the equator, and also the many rain that is receiving and the people that is living there and is using this ecosystem. So here are fisheries in Nauta in Peru. So I'm going to start with the longitudinal connectivity. This is from the highlands to the lowlands. Highlands from where? Highlands here in the Andes. And is this going to? Okay. From the highlands to the lowlands, here we have the Escudo Guyanés, here we have the Brazilian Shield, and here we have the Andes. And from this region, the water is draining, forming the Great Amazon. Here you could see a mountain, this is in Ecuador, and here's how the river is connected going down. And what I just told you, the geology is pretty new, so whenever it rains, a lot of erosion is coming down, okay? So here in Manaus, you see the mix of the waters this is coming from the Andes with a lot of sediment, and this is the Rio Negro that you could see from satellite that is coming from the Escudo Guyanés that is way older, so it's not eroding anymore. So this is fantastic because the chemistry, the biology of the system completely depends on this connectivity and the evolution of life that we have in this area. And this gradient, as I mentioned before, is also what produced this very high speciation that we have. So in any of these groups, the diversity that we have in this 100 meters square is comparable of all the diversity that we have in Europe. So it's very impressive, the diversity that we have. And this is the same for aquatic systems. So aquatic systems are pretty diverse. Fish diversity is huge. We have more than 2,700 species. Okay, this one. But still, specialists, ichthyologists think that maybe we have 500 or 1,000 more species that haven't been investigated. What about other groups like insects, algae, other organisms that we still haven't investigated them yet? But very few research. And one of the main examples of this amazing connectivity is this fish, the Goliath catfish, El Dorado, which has the highest migration on Earth. It travels more than 12,000 kilometers from the mouth of the Amazon, from the estuary, all the way up to the Andes, spans here, and then returns to the estuary. Imagine that migration every year. That's pretty amazing. So, however, this connectivity is getting disconnected because of the many projects that we have in the Amazon. Infrastructure, roads, hydropower. This is in Ecuador, and these are examples of zero environmental flow, and all these cuts and the fragmentation that we have are critical for the system. And this, of course, is not impacting just the fauna that is living there, but also the people, because people are eating these fishes around the area. But it's impacting also the sediment flow, the erosion, and the many nutrients that the Andes are giving to the lowlands, to the floodplains. So what do we do about this? So we need a new freshwater conservation framework in which not just the forest is important to conserve and to restore, but the water system, because they are not just water resources. There are there are water ecosystems. So we need to restore these ecosystems. We need a catchment bank conservation framework, and we need to maintain uninterrupted freshwater connectivity corridors. It's important that we monitor the systems. We were just talking about this, we don't have a unique institution that could put together all the monitoring in the area. And Brazil has good monitoring, Ecuador has terrible monitoring, Peru has so, and so on. But we need a serious monitoring, and we need the governments to talk to each other and share information to make decisions. We're also proposing a recommendation here about a moratorium on dam construction. Excuse me. A moratorium of dam construction. We really think that we need transnational agreements between the countries to talk about new energy alternatives that are renewable for the whole region. We need to explore also to remove some dams. Some dams right now are producing more methane and CO2 from the area to the whole world. So this is a big concern in some areas. The lateral connectivity is what we receive from the drainage basin and what we give to the floodplain. And this is a critical connectivity. This is a critical connectivity because, as I mentioned before, the sediment, the nutrients, are going to the whole floodplain. And we need to maintain this floodplain productive. And this flood plus dynamics is a natural dynamic we have on the system. If we don't have that, the system is not gonna work fine. However, we have many problems related to breaking this connectivity. We have degradation, as they were explaining us before. We have mining, a lot of illegal mining on the area, and this is having heavy consequences on this lateral connectivity. What is happening with the floodplain, with the riparian vegetation, and of course with the contamination that is coming from many of these activities. These are illegal mining that we have all over, so everything that you see here in orange is mining, is already destroyed, so we need to restore those areas. Next one, please. I'm not able to move, I think, with this. And of course, we have a lot of problem with sewage and water that has not been treated. So most of the cities in the Amazon don't have any treatment of sewage. So everything goes directly to the waterways. So we really need to work on this. So we need policies in each country, local policies, but also regional policies to how to deal with this pollution and sanitation, because this is impacting people. We need to invest in green infrastructure and solutions for treatment plants. We need to restore and remediate, and also we need more research, innovation on the ecosystems, on the human populations that are getting sick because of very bad water. The vertical connectivity is what Marengo and Flavia already explained us, is basically receiving the rain, the precipitation is critical. The forest is by itself a water pump. So up to 50% of precipitation that we receive in the Amazon comes from the Amazon. That means that if we cut the forest, we receive less rain. So that's why it's critical to maintain the forest. I'm not going to explain that much these graphs, they already did, but basically the south is getting very dry, and the north is getting more wet, and the extreme events are getting more often. And these pictures, like the drought that we had last year, are striking because of the mortality of the fish, mortality of the dolphins, and people are suffering. They are not moving and they don't have enough water in the Amazon. And so what do we do about this? We need to have freshwater policies. We don't have freshwater policies for the region, and these need to align with the strategies of degradation and deforestation that we have, and of course with the policies of climate change, because everything is connected. So if we have tipping points for the forest in the Amazon, we also have tipping points for the water. So that means that rivers are becoming intermittent, and this is very frightening. Also, we need to conserve the forests and the floodplains and restore them in many cases, and also peatlands and wetlands. Remember that wetlands in the Amazon are huge, represent like 21% of all the water that we have are wetlands. And of course, there are these connections. There are the economic connections. So people are eating from the river. The second biggest fishery in the world is in the Amazon. So this is a very important connection that we have, right? The protein that people are getting is from fish. But also there are other connections that we don't know sometimes, even people that live in those cities. Many of the highland cities in the Andes live from water coming from the Amazon. So they transfer water from the Amazon and move it to Quito. In Quito, for example, 3 million people, 85% of the water is coming from the Amazon. This is an important political connection and economic connection. So also, I mentioned before, 48 million people are living in the Amazon, so they are doing many different activities, right? And and we need water for all the activities that we have. And there are many indigenous groups that live in the Amazon, 2.2 million, 400 indigenous groups. And it's very important that they have their own traditions, their own beliefs. And they have been managing and living with the water for a very long time, and we need to take that into account for conservation. So here for recommendations, we're suggesting sustainable fisheries management. Many countries in the area don't have policies for freshwater fisheries, so we need to implement those. We need innovative projects and bioeconomic alternatives to discourage illicit activities that it has grown in the area a lot. The traffic of mercury is a big thing, even bigger than drugs, so that's very important. And we need to promote investment in water and river tourism that is important and for local people and also for visitors. Yeah, this is my last email. Thank you. And in terms of the biocultural connectivity, it's very important that we recognize indigenous and local knowledge, integrate this knowledge into conservation and research strategies, and we need to communicate, disseminate education of Amazon waters. Amazon waters are not just a resource, they are an ecosystem and they are part of the whole important cycles to maintain what we need as human beings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marengo and Flavia, for highlighting how we had many one-of-a-century droughts over the past 20 years, and how worrying it is that this current drought will even extend to 2025. Also, the impacts to tree mortality, carbon loss, animal mortality, fire, food insecurity, health crisis, problems for transportation, so the many problems that are coming out of these droughts. And also Andrea for highlighting the importance of the Andes, Amazonia, and Atlantic connectivity and the threats for this, and how it is important to consider not only the forests, but also freshwater conservation and the integrated monitoring. So now I would like to invite to the floor Ms. Beka Munduruku and Mr. Erwin Denis. Beka and Erwin. Also, Beka will be speaking in Portuguese, so if you need interpretation, we have headsets right over there in that table. Thank you.
otro todavía. ¿Quieres este de aquí? No.
We'll continue in a minute. We're just waiting for the people to get the headsets. Thank you.
Oi. Olá, meu nome é Beka, sou indígena do povo Munduruku, sou do Brasil, do estado do Pará. Venho aqui, para falar sobre águas secas na Amazônia. Eu venho da região que é do território que é muito explorado pelo garimpo ilegal, que ultimamente tem se expandido muito no nosso território. E nós, da região, sofremos muito já desde muito antes com o garimpo ilegal na região. E tanto nós, como do território, como os ribeirinhos também, que sofrem com isso. Então, isso já vem sendo uma consequência já desde muito antes, com a destruição da floresta e dos rios, onde nós, povos indígenas da região, já não temos mais acesso a tanto a água, assim como os peixes que vivem na água, pela consequência de poluição, destruição dos territórios, nas cabeceiras dos igarapés, que são uma fonte de sobrevivência do nosso povo Munduruku, e os animais, que também traz a alimentação para a nossa população indígena da região do Tapajós. Então, a gente sofre muito com isso. E desde então, com o desmatamento e a exploração do garimpo ilegal, que trouxe muito isso, de afastamento de caças, destruição da floresta, e isso afetou muito também nas plantações da população indígena da região. E com tudo isso que está acontecendo sobre mudanças climáticas, a mudança climática, como diz meu pai, já vem de muito antes. Hoje que a gente começou a se despertar, a ouvir falar e a sentir na pele do que tudo está acontecendo agora. E isso é um alerta que já nossos ancestrais vêm passando, isso é uma coisa que já vem sendo trazido de geração por geração. E a gente, como indígena, a gente sabe e sente tudo isso. E hoje a gente está aqui fazendo grandes eventos, reuniões para se discutir sobre mudanças climáticas que já acontecem há muitos anos. Só que hoje está se agravando. Hoje as pessoas estão sentindo na pele o que realmente isso vem trazendo de consequências para a população mundial. A seca na Amazônia extrema, e na nossa região, isso já aconteceu, e vem acontecendo, e a gente está vendo que esse ano a seca vai ser muito maior ainda do que o ano passado, porque o que aconteceu no ano passado, muitos lugares não voltaram como era antes, A seca continuou ali, está ali, afetando as populações ribeirinhas e indígenas da região. E como vai ser esse ano? Aqueles lugares que secaram e não voltaram ao normal, como vai ficar? A gente precisa olhar também, além de falar sobre a seca na Amazônia, falar também das populações que vivem na Amazônia, que dependem do rio, dependem da floresta, assim como os indígenas que perderam suas plantações, assim como os ribeirinhos que ficaram isolados nas suas comunidades, sem poder ter acesso à cidade onde eles buscam as suas alimentações, sem poder ter acesso à água, porque ficou impossível. Impossível de pescar, impossível de beber a água, impossível de usar a água para lavar suas roupas, suas louças. Isso afeta muito a nossa região. E a gente está falando sobre todas essas consequências. E se a gente não fazer o que a gente deve fazer, o que a gente tem que fazer, né, pela floresta amazônica, pela população que vive na Amazônia. Porque a gente fala muito na floresta amazônica, mas nunca se fala dos povos que vivem na Amazônia, porque são os povos que defendem a Amazônia, né? São os povos que dão a vida, são os povos que estão ali nos seus territórios para defender a Amazônia. E muitos falam de tudo isso, né? E se não existissem os povos indígenas da Amazônia, o que seria da Amazônia? Não existiria a Amazônia, porque são os indígenas que estão ali defendendo seu território, defendendo seu lugar sagrado para poder sobreviver, porque a gente é da floresta, a gente é a floresta, né? E a gente vem falando isso de muitos anos, e todos os anos a gente traz esse alerta, né, que fala sobre mudanças climáticas. A gente fala tudo isso sobre as consequências que são trazidas de dentro dos territórios, a gente fala isso, né? E trazendo a juventude também para formalizar. Eu venho do território que poucos falam a língua portuguesa. E eu não falo inglês, e eu estou aqui para falar pelo meu povo, para falar pelo povo que vive na Amazônia, pelo povo que está lá lutando pela Amazônia, né? E a gente está no território onde é um território super explorado pelo garimpo ilegal, e a gente resiste ali de muitos e muitos anos. E a gente nunca desistiu, e a gente sempre traz essas consequências para fora de como isso está afetando. E sem os territórios indígenas, a gente não tem justiça climática, né? A gente fala muito sobre a justiça climática, mas cada vez mais, cada ano, o governo vem explorando os territórios, aumenta o desmatamento, aumenta o garimpo dentro do território. E a gente traz isso, né, essas consequências, para poder todo mundo ver que isso realmente é uma consequência que a população mundial precisa saber, né? A gente precisa falar sobre territórios indígenas e mudanças climáticas, sim.
Hello. Thank you, Isabella. First of all, I would like to congratulate José, Flavia, Andrea, and Beka for very powerful interventions. My name is Erwin. I'm from the World Bank, which is a development institution that works with the Amazon countries. And first of all, I would like to say how much we really value the contribution of academia, of science, and in particular the science panel for the Amazon, which we've been supporting over the past years, the 280 scientists, because it's important for us to be able to put climate change at the heart of our operations and to anticipate its future impacts. We are here we've been listening to our four panelists, really a call for action. On the one hand, basically on the severity of drought, its natural causes, its severity, but also its impacts. It impacts on biodiversity, on water, on freshwater systems, on people, but also, as Andrea was mentioning, the fragmentation of the connectivity, which really puts the resilience of the Amazon system at risk. Now, why is this important for the World Bank? The World Bank's mission is to end poverty on a livable planet. And I think Beka mentioned it really well. It is foremost also about the people. The 48 million people that live in the Amazon, the 2 million indigenous peoples and local communities. And we all know that their level of poverty is already much below the level of poverty of the countries at their national averages. Illiteracy rates, access to sanitation, as Flavia was mentioning. And so creating the enabling conditions to end poverty on a livable Amazon is key. And I think here the contributions of a scientific panel for the Amazon is of utmost importance. But also, as many of my colleagues mentioned, it's to work with the institutions, the local communities, the regional institutions, the national institutions, but also at the level of the Amazon region as a whole. And this is where the World Bank has been engaged in the Amazon region, in particular through the Amazon Sustainable Landscapes Program that is financed by the GEF and that is also supporting the science panel for the Amazon, where we've been working for the last 10 years on integrated landscape management in 8 of the Amazon countries at national level, but also at basically at regional level, on conservation aspects and protected areas, but also on basically the productive aspects and really fostering this regional integration. One of these interventions related to it is in the Putumayo-Isa River Basin, where basically also through GEF, Global Environment Facility Resources, we are fostering this integration at the level of this river basin and the ecosystem between Brazil, Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. And we are scaling up basically our engagement in the Amazon region through our Amazonia Viva program, both on basically pillars of the green Amazon, and here we really refer to the activities related to conservation, to both protection of forests and water and ecosystems, but also very much on basically the prosperous Amazon, as Beka was mentioning. It is about the economies, it is about making sure that the people who we are asking to protect their forests can make a living of it, and that basically that they see as natural assets for jobs and GDP. And finally, the livable Amazon, and here I'm referring to basically the basic services, health, sanitation, transportation, etc. And finally, and here is, I think, the most challenging part, is a regional integration part of this, to basically work together and make sure that we're all speaking the same language when it comes to basically impacts of droughts at the regional, national, and subnational level. In terms of concrete suggestions, and I think there were lots of recommendations that came out of the policy papers, and I think we are, as a development institution, we are really interested in making sure that the messages, that the recommendations of these policy papers reach the decision makers. And so in that regard, I think what I would suggest is really to think, who are those institutions from local level to regional level who can implement these recommendations? We need to understand what are the strengths and the weaknesses of the institutions that monitor the drought events. We need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the institutions that are aware of the vulnerabilities of people, of ecosystems, but we also need to be able to transform this thinking into preparedness plans, be prepared against these, as Marengo and others were mentioning, this probability of continued droughts in the Amazon. So in that regard, we really look forward to thinking through how to work together and to see this as a call for action. Again, these are processes that are meant to be led by the people, by the local communities, but with the support of basically national, federal, and international support. Thank you.
Thank you, Erwin. Bom, obrigada, Beka, por mais uma vez ter chamado a atenção para os impactos do garimpo ilegal, das secas para as populações indígenas e para as comunidades ribeirinhas, e por também trazer essa questão de como os povos indígenas realmente têm sido os grandes defensores da floresta e ainda assim acabam sofrendo com invasões, contaminação e todas essas injustiças. And thank you, Erwin, for highlighting the importance of working with institutions and looking at the strengths, weaknesses for implementing these plans, and the importance of fostering regional integration. And would like now to open the floor for questions. My colleagues, Daniel, are you the one running with the microphone? Or yeah, so if you have any questions, you can reach to Daniel right over there.
Hi, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation and introduction. So I work on the study on the investment from China into other parts of the world, including but not limited to Amazon region. But right now, like for example, China has been trying to get their domestic policy into more like green and like new productivity, which means they will be very happy to divert the money into the place which might align with, like say Amazon's like every like water and like the bioeconomy, everything. But my question is, how do you think would be the best way for the institutional or even like private like money to have less chance of being in in risk? Because previously there are so many projects that meant to be doing good, but like socially or economically, it has so many negative impacts. And sometimes it's the coordination problem, sometimes it's because of the lack of capacity to do the due diligence, and a lot of time is because of the lack of knowledge for the area. But this structural inconsistency seems very hard to really close the gap. Is there any like practical tools or like tips that you see on the ground would be very important to improve the situation? Thank you.
I may make a comment, but I'm not an economist. Okay. I'm not an economist, so I cannot give you a real recommendation. But something that I have been seeing is that lots of money that should be fostering these carbon credits is being diverted in a very bad ways. And because most of this money is going to private, to the private carbon offset market, not to the public, which is controlled by the government and so can be monitored. So I would say that any investments should coordinate with government activities, government levels, to make sure the use is under monitoring and it's not going to be diverted into activities that look like they are protecting the forest or fostering bioeconomy, but they are not.
As a biologist, I have seen the problem that you mentioned. I think is a critical problem that, money arrives and then, is expended in not really in solving the problem, right? So why invest then? But I think that you were given part of the answer. I think it's capacity building. I think that we need to communicate information better. And when people are convinced that they need a change, I really believe in the bottom-up approaches. I think top-down is very important, but bottom-up as well. But people need to be better informed with what is going on. We recently had an experience in my city, in Quito, of it was just a documentary about how we don't have any treatment plant for Quito City. People didn't know this, didn't know it at all. However, there were many groups already working, putting together a proposal and actually also a demand for the municipality to do something with the water. But it has been a process that took very long time to educate a group of people and have 20 or 30 institutions behind that, to have lawyers and to have an interdisciplinary group working on this. This is not for an economist, this is not for a biologist, this is for a group of people solving problems, but that understand the problematic. Right now, I think that most people don't understand, and that's why they don't feel it as their own. And I think that we are all here. So we are all, ¿cómo se dice? Cómplices. No sé, ¿cómo se dice? Cómplices. Accomplices, yeah. Yeah, we are all accomplices of this, right? We are all users. We're using the water. We're using the mining as well. We hate to hear that, right? Because we are against mining, but we're using it. So cell phones, exactly. So we are users. So how do we use these things, recognizing, right, that we want to keep using this for the future in a sustainable way? And that's the trick. We are kind of separating ourselves from what is happening. And that's why it's so hard. Sometimes money comes, but the people don't know very well what to do with the money. So this capacity building at many different levels is a necessity.
Yes, I have some comment on this. I'm a climatologist, so each time I heard about this carbon market, I mean, it's really scary because as a meteorologist, I know that the carbon is there. I cannot take this carbon and sell it to you. The carbon will there. You can, if I say, for instance, oh, I buy you 20 years of your life. I should say yes, so I pay you $1 million. You get the money. You still have your 20 years. I don't. So it's the same thing with the market. I mean, I see in a way that it's good to generate funds, generate money for building policies for ecosystem services, which actually is the focus of the Amazon, the ecosystem services they have. But remember that there is something like the adaptation funds or the green fund. A lot of money that is supposed to come, but nobody knows. If it comes, nobody knows who will manage it. Of course, it cannot be a foreign company because the sovereignty of Brazil will say it has to be a Brazilian organization. Who? How do you guarantee that this money will go from the funds, from the government to the people that actually that need to that? Because there is a factor called corruption, which is in everywhere. Every country, they have some level of corruption. So, like you said, there is a need for capacity building, not just for the population, but also for whoever is going to manage these kind of funds. You see, there's a lot of capacity building in there. And like I said, not 100% that arrives will arrive to the people who need it for implementation and adaptation policies. Because adaptation policies are basically environmental laws from the government. So you have to give it to the government. How the government will spend, who will certificate that the money will spend well the money, that's a good question.
Thank you. I'm going to try to be quick, but I have to alert you that I'm really happy, so maybe I'm going to talk a little bit more than usual. First of all, I came from the Amazon region, from the same state as Beka, so I'm going to take the, I don't know, the excuse to talk in Portuguese, and then you can all use your headphones. Beka, é muito bom te ver aqui. Há 2 anos eu vim nesse espaço e comentei como eu sentia falta da perspectiva local sendo representada nesses painéis. E a Isa, com toda a sensibilidade do mundo, tem feito um trabalho fantástico de garantir a inclusão das experiências locais também. E o SDSN tem sido um grande propulsor do protagonismo das vozes amazônicas em espaços como a Casa Amazônia, que foi apoiada no ano passado. Esse ano também vai acontecer na Semana do Clima. Então, já fica o convite para todos os que quiserem estar presentes. Foi muito interessante como vocês trouxeram os dados muito concretos de todos os impactos que existem na região amazônica. E como a Beka fechou isso lindamente, colocando o impacto gigantesco para as populações indígenas. Uma das recomendações que eu mais gostei foi a da Flávia, sobre como é que a gente pode usar os fundos de perdas e danos para efetivamente pensar em adaptações concretas. E essa é um pouco da minha pergunta para vocês. Quais são os tipos de discussão que a gente poderia estar fazendo? E aí, já pensando um pouco nas discussões da COP desse ano, que vão levar muito para perdas e danos, quais poderiam ser os pedidos que vocês, enquanto pesquisadores líderes, o Erwin, enquanto Banco Mundial, poderiam levar adiante para levar atenção para esse tema de secas e todos os impactos que geram para as populações da floresta. E uma pergunta subsequente também seria como a gente poderia gerar cada vez mais capacidade instalada local para realizar pesquisas e de desenvolvimento tecnológico para as questões experienciadas pela Amazônia.
Well, honestly, I would like to have the answer for you, but I probably don't, because I'm a scientist, so I know what are the problems. I have a very reasonable understanding of the problems, but how do you pass from that to the action? I think this is when, as Andrea was saying, we need more than the biologists, the climatologists, and the other types of science. We need people that understand how to translate from a scientific recommendation to an action. I see what are the types of programs that we need. So definitely we need fire control and fire management. We need water management, water sanitation, several activities in turn around water. Andrea talked a lot of that. And water, even if we are in the Amazon, is a really serious issue. So we need several programs on water. We need programs on food security, which is linked to bioeconomy, because we need to change the metrics of production of food. And it's not through monoculture. And disease monitoring. It's, the Amazon is the source of many diseases that are not being properly monitored and cared of. How to do these programs? The only thing I say is this cannot be just decided in the higher level of the governments. They need to come down and talk to the populations, because otherwise they might be working well in some parts of Ecuador. They might be working in some parts of Brazil, but they may not work in everywhere because the realities are very different. Every population has different and specific needs. So I would say just, it's not me who will provide the answer. It's a larger group with much more of different professionals with different skills that need to be put together. And maybe the World Bank can help on that with funding these types of panels on implementation of what the scientists have been appointing as problems. Comments on that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for your question. Two things in response to it. First of all, really to reinforce your point about the importance of local communities in basically assessing impact, right? Impact of, in this case, we're talking about drought. So what we've seen, and there's a couple of interesting experiences, including from Brazil, where other regions have basically faced prolonged droughts, and I'm referring here to the region of the Northeast, right, just next to the Amazon, where that region was also impacted 2011, 2018 by a very prolonged drought, which was atypical for the region. And so the region basically addressed this by working on three dimensions. One was to strengthening the whole monitoring and early warning of drought. Secondly was to be better aware of the vulnerability of basically people, of communities, of ecosystems. And three was to think about going forward how to be better prepared and how to move away from, let's say, the traditional reactive management of drought to more risk-based proactive drought. And so this was not reinventing the wheel. This was actually really based on other experiences in the world about basically monitoring drought. But here the impact is very much, the whole monitoring of drought is based on a network of communities, farming extensioners, forest communities, etc. That do the ground truthing of basically what the models are saying. And this is extremely powerful because this is coming back from the local level to basically the interpretation of what the policymaker will ask. How do I need to deal? Is this like a moderate drought or is this like a very severe drought, and what am I supposed to do? So this whole basically ground truthing is very important, and this was my first point. Secondly, as Flavia was saying, there is platforms that are extremely powerful. For example, the global dialogue on indigenous peoples and local communities, who as a World Bank we've been supporting, and that really advocate for, let's say, direct access to climate finance, for example. More capacity building when it comes, as our previous person in the audience was saying, about environmental and social risk management. So indeed, this is a role that we as a World Bank, we like to play, let's say, be this bridge between, on the one hand, science, but make sure that it's applied science and that it gets to basically decision makers when formulation of investment plans, for example. Thanks. Other panelists?
Thank you for the question. So Flavia Marengo explained the natural causes and also the anthropogenic causes. And it's very clear that the trend that we have of climate change is here, right? And that is global. So I think that sometimes we're afraid to talk about limits, but I think it's important to talk about limits because I think that we are exceeding the planetary limits. And it's not just the local populations that need to change, it's actually the global population that needs to change. And many things. So that many people, we are all afraid to talk about. And that is, we could not have the highest standards of living that we have right now. So consumption has to be lower than we have now because we are too many people. And that is in everything. So I think that if we don't change climate change, even though the local populations are doing their own things, we're still going to have the droughts coming because the global climate is the global crisis that we have. So I think is a change of culture of whole human beings, and that is difficult. That is difficult. But in my house, I have one son and my husband and I, and just changing how we manage the garbage is difficult. Imagine that with the city. Imagine that with the world. It's difficult, and this is garbage. But then, are we really thinking about the consumption that we have? And the food that we eat, and everything that we do. We open the water and we have water there. That's not the same for other populations. In the Amazon, in the Andes, in many places in the world. So we have the luxury of many resources, but we think they don't have a limit. So I think we really need to educate people on limits. The boundaries that we are exceeding right now and that are having huge consequences for the whole world.
I have a question. I will speak in Portuguese soon because I have a question for Beka, coming from people who are watching us online. Beka, muito frequentemente se fala da importância de estabelecer diálogos entre conhecimentos indígenas e científicos. O que a gente pode aprender, vindo do conhecimento indígena, sobre prevenir e se recuperar de mudanças climáticas, secas e manter os ecossistemas aquáticos?
Eu acho que recuperar tudo isso é quase impossível, né? Mas eu acho que a gente manter isso ainda, né, de respeitar os povos indígenas, respeitar a cultura, isso a gente consegue, sim, manter isso vivo, né? Porque tudo se fala dos povos indígenas, tudo que vem dos povos indígenas é sagrado. Então, tudo que vem sendo destruído é uma falta de respeito para nós, né, dos lugares sagrados, e que a gente manter ainda, não só pela vida dos povos indígenas, mas acredito que pela vida de todo o mundo, assim, que vive no planeta, né?
Obrigada, Beka. We have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Nicole. I'm from the Creative Society, and I guess this is somewhat geared towards for the World Bank. I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce your last name, but my question is how likely will it be for alternative forms of like atmospheric water generation or fuel-free generators? How quickly can that be implemented if that could, and how could somebody from like a nonprofit kind of get their foot in the door with really implementing technologies that we can stop taking from rivers, we can stop taking from the resources we have and start letting that heal, because it is really alarming to hear that, like, yeah, there's not going to be, it's not going to fully recover. Like, the Amazon will not fully recover, and if we don't act now, what will happen? And realistically, like, hydropower affects the environment, so there are like inventors like Moses West and people creating alternative energy. How likely is the World Bank to fund something like that, like seriously fund it?
Thank you very much for your question. So when it comes to basically, innovative ways of, let's say, generation of drinkable water, for example, I think that is something that we have promoted in several of the regions, and I was mentioning the case of the northeast of Brazil, but really several regions where this basically approach of water security looks at that. And so on the one hand, we've been looking at, let's say, analytical work. What are these technologies available? What are their costs? What is their affordability? What is their accessibility, right, to local populations? And then very often they make their way in, let's say, design of investment programs. This is in the end a decision to be made by the implementers of investment projects. But definitely we are fostering, let's say, innovative technologies when it comes to generation of drinkable water, or also when it comes to basically sustainable, low carbon sources of energy. So this is something that I'd love to explore further with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So once again, thank you all for joining us today. People here, people who are watching us online. Thank you for joining us in this really inspiring event. I would also like to thank all of the scientists here, Beka and Erwin, and also SPA scientists, reviewers, coordinators, and the Secretariat. And the SPA is also grateful to the support of the Global Environment Facility and the World Bank, the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation, and the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation for the support. And finally, I would like to let you know that the SPA is currently establishing a youth advisory committee. So if you know young people between 18 and 30 years old engaged in a scientific career or in Amazonian conservation, please encourage them to apply on our website, or if you want to apply yourself. Thank you all again for coming.